Okay, guys, let's grab a chair if there's a chair. I don't know if we got one or not, but good turnout. What else are you going to do on a crummy day like today? So, welcome to our spring meeting of the Twin Cities RV Builders Group. Kind of postponed from the blizzard a few weeks ago anyway, so that was a lot of fun. Got a story. I ordered all these pastries last for the meeting before that, and had like $100 worth of pastries ordered. And so then the big snowstorm came that morning. We're all wondering, can't even get out of my garage. And the bakery lady called me up and said, our power's been off all night long, so I couldn't bake your stuff. I said, good, because I can't buy them. Otherwise, I'd have to eat them. So that turned out very well. So anyway, thanks for showing up today. And so we got a couple things on the agenda we're going to discuss today. We got Eric Jansen's going to talk a little bit about an interesting circumstance that happened to him, and then Pete Howe's going to discuss his flying career in great detail, I guess, things like that. A couple things that I can recall. First of all, any brand new guys here that have never... Eric, of course, he's going to talk about himself. Yeah, introduce yourselves, guys, in the back. Good. Welcome. Glad you're here. And Tyler. Good. Great. Good. That guy's new? Uh-oh. When new guys walk in, they got to tell us the whole story. Introduce yourself. Good. Great. Super duper. Good. Anybody else new? Yes. Pete, yeah. Keep going. Good. Anybody else? Well, thanks for coming. Yes.
Yeah, hi. I'm Guy Freeman. I got a partner, John Davis, on his way.
Okay.
We just bought an RV8 from Amarillo, Texas, from the south side of the field here. So new to the
Good.
new to the group and looking for networking and knowledge. I know you get 10 different opinions if you ask 10 different people.
That's the truth, I know.
I finally get to make some decisions and
Well, that's why we're here. For you new guys, by the way, I think most of you are aware, but the club has been around for 30-some years. We've got about 290 members in the club, as far as I can tell, at least on our mailing list. So it's been active for a long time. I think we're the oldest RV builders group, I think, in the world, maybe.
Because of you, Doug.
Well, I don't know about that. I doubt it. It's because nobody else is stupid enough to do it, I guess. I don't know. But a little under 100 on the list of flying RVs. I mean, I don't know exactly how many are in the Twin Cities, but there's a good number that keep popping up all the time. And so it's great. We have quite a few here at Lake Elmo, maybe 6 or 7, maybe a little bit more than that. Kevin Munson, how many is at Crystal? Kevin, where are you at? Yeah, down there. How many is at Crystal, would you guess?
Well, in the corner, we had
9, yeah, just there. Inoka's got them, so they're... Yeah. And there's a few stealth ones out there we don't know about that people kind of hide in the shadows, but that's great. A couple of business things. I'm just trying to... Bernie, our treasurer, is down in Nashville right now, so he's not here. Tom Bergey's not here either. He's bringing an airplane back from California as we speak. So he's somewhere, I think, in Sturgis, I believe, is where he's at, spent the night. So kind of waiting for the weather to... And Tom's always off on these extravaganzas that I can't even imagine. But I will tell you his story that he did talk to me the other day. He said he flew out on Southwest on, Thursday morning. His plan was to get this airplane back here by last night, which was impossible. So they tried to get this airplane going. They got to the L.A. area airport. It was the Camarillo, California. And I think he told me that they got there about 11 o'clock in the morning, their time. The plan was to get the paperwork and get out of there within an hour or so. But the paperwork wasn't there available. The mechanic who had signed off the transponder check wasn't there, and they had to get this, wait for this guy to show up. So by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they were finally able to leave. By that time, they decided they're not going to come back through Albuquerque, so they decided they're going to go the northern route, like Anchorage, Winnipeg, or something down like this, I believe. And so the next thing I know, he landed in Redding, California, which is Northern California. So they were going to come back the northern route yesterday. And the weather was good out there, so I think they got back as far as, I think, Sturgis. And coming here today, I don't know if they'll make it or not, maybe. So maybe they're stuck out there forever, who knows. But anyway, that's Tom. That's his life. Kevin, you said you had a couple things you wanted to...
I don't know if anybody's familiar with Doug from Harmony Aviation, prop balancer. He retired, moved north, found out the retirement didn't work, so he moved back here. So anybody who needs a prop balance, you had him do your prop.
Yeah, way back.
He had his prop done, he just did mine. He has a special price for RV drivers.
He always does, yeah.
What is that? $250.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, he's done my airplanes from, gosh, we moved here in 1988, and I know he did my Cessna 180 way back then. So he's been in this business forever. So he's back at it. But a prop balance is good. You may not know the difference sometimes. You can't detect it, but your baffling doesn't crack as easily and things like that. So it just depends, but it's beneficial. Another thing, anything, yes?
Is he on this field?
He's kind of travels, right? Yeah.
He's over in St. Paul, but he comes to you.
Yeah, he's got a box and
Your airport sets equipment up.
yeah.
He's done it enough times that we had before spin-ups and he dialed it right in.
Oh, he's done hundreds and hundreds of it, props. I know of it over time. So
Sure. And you can also look him up, Harmony Aviation.
Harmony Aviation, yeah, he's got a website.
And
Yep.
he said at the very minimal, he said he only balances a lot of props. He said, if people are interested, the first thing I want them to do is go to my website and read what I put together. He said, and you'll have a better understanding how this works, the effects of it. But he suggested anybody to go to Harmony Aviation, open up his website, and read what he's posted regarding prop balancing. Even if you're not going to balance it, you should read that information.
Yeah, oh yeah, great.
Pretty straightforward.
Good. Okay.
I had a prop balance last summer at this place down in Iowa, because I was going to another place in Iowa to have transponder check and all that stuff, so it was on the way. And I made the mistake of, the guy did a good job, but he charged by the hour.
Oh,
This guy charges a flat rate, you're better off.
yeah, yeah.
He didn't have his equipment hooked up right, and it took 4 or 5 spin-ups, and by the time I was done, it was close to $400.
Really? Wow.
Pretty good,
Yeah.
but you're stuck.
Yeah, that's true. Very interesting. Good. There is one other thing I know. Let's see, there's a petition. Bob, there you go. Bob's got a petition for Lake Elmo folks over there. Maybe you can just explain what you got there. You can talk.
Trying to get an alternate entrance to this side of the field off of 14 due to the traffic on Manning and the fact that there's going to be several years of construction. And also when they're done, there's going to be a north-only exit from this side. We do have a crossover that they'll pave here sometime in the next year to get to the other side of the field, the other entrance if we want. But we're driving between people's hangars, so it's going to be a lot of traffic around here. What this will do is it'll get us out on the road faster because when the buses come along after school, heavy traffic all the time on Manning, the buses have to stop at the road tracks to get things pretty backed up. So even if you're going southbound on Manning, this would be a much easier way out. Mac already owns the property that this exit would be on. There's already a ramp, curbing and stuff, already coming off of Manning. It's for the development, but it would run right smack into this road. So if anybody would care to, would interested, just let Mac know that we're interested. We've already talked to him about it. They said it could be feasible. We don't know if there's any interest. Just make life much easier getting that out of here. So then this, put this over on one of these chairs.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, Bob.
There's a map too showing the road would come in right next to Lake Elmo.
Great. Any Lake Elmo guys? I got finagled into being on the Lake Elmo Airport Advisory Board or something, I think it's called. So I went to one of the meetings, and I think there's another meeting coming up. So if there's any other Lake Elmo issues, I suppose I could pass that along. I don't know what I'm doing in this board, but I can figure it out anyway. So they have some airport users on the board, and then some community leaders are involved. The mayor of Lake Elmo, mayor of Oak Park Heights, a few things like that, and MAC. So it seems to be a good organization to get one's issues voiced amongst the MAC people in the local government. So it's good. Anyway, let's get cooking here. I'd like to introduce Eric Jensen. Eric's from Flying Cloud. He's got an interesting story to tell us about how his airplane got wrecked in his hangar, I guess is the best way to describe it. Come on up. Eric, and the clicker's right here. You can
put this. Sweet. So, my name's Eric. I'm at Flying Cloud, and I bought an RV 2 months ago. I had Tom Berge do a pre-buy on it. So there it is. That was taken a week ago. So this is the way it currently looks, and it's going to a salvage auction. It got totaled in the hangar. So it's kind of a weird state because it's probably the cleanest looking RV you'll see in the state that it's in. So story behind it is I bought it in February. The previous owner was 6'3". I'm not 6'3". So there was some work to do to make the rudder pedals properly fit for me. So I had done a lot of work on that. The pre-buy didn't find a whole lot of things. There was some oil lines and fuel lines that I wanted to redo. So I did that. There were some zip ties that were directly on the engine mounts without any rubber or anything like that. So removed all those, did a bunch of stuff, put a Tannis preheater on it, cleaned up everything under the cowling, and then I got to work to making it so I could, see out of it, and then also so I could touch the rudder pedals. So I was just finishing up that in March, and the end of March. The other issue with the rudder pedals on the 4 is that the cylinder is really close to the brake, so when you shorten up the cables per van's diagrams, it'll actually contact the brake pedal. So full right rudder, once I got them adjusted to my size, would hit left brake. So there was a little more work that was involved that I didn't anticipate once I put them back in, which is a tight fit in there. So I took them back out, put them back in, took them back out, put them back in. And they fit great then. So the bottom cowling was a little difficult to get on, so I was going to fly it or taxi test it that night and make sure there was no leaks and then go fly. But it was too late and I was too tired and I figured that wasn't a good idea. So fast forward another day or so, I had a friend come up to help me put the bottom cowling on. And when we got there, the plane was in a little different shape than it is in these pictures. So this just shows it all cleaned up and all shiny. And there's the hangar. So I'll explain the hangar real quick. So it's just an open, like T hangar. There's a bunch of planes and people in the hangar. This is what I came to see. So when I walked in there, I was kind of confused. I thought, was someone cutting up 2x4s? Because that's really dusty, and the plane was just clean, the 2 days before that when I was finishing my work on it. So you can see the bottom cowling is off. I had the top cowling on, and you can see there's kind of a line over the avionics panel there. That's I had a blanket over it because I had the preheater plugged in and going. So I had that going because I had planned to put the bottom cowling on, let it preheat longer, and then go fly it. So I walked over to it with my buddy, and we were like, "What is this? What's on the plane?" And we were like, "Well, it's not sawdust." And I looked close. I was like, "Is it concrete dust? Or are they shaving down because the door has been having issues getting up and down?" I was like, "Is it concrete dust?" He goes, "No, it's not concrete dust." And he looked close, and he was like, "It's like crystallized." I'm like, "Well, that's kind of weird." So I couldn't figure out what it was, and then I looked to my right, which was a further picture of it, and there was a fire extinguisher on the ground. And if you can tell by this one, it's like your normal Class ABC fire extinguisher, which you use on like a lot of general fires, but they shouldn't generally be around airplanes. And one had been in the hangar for many, many years that none of us even really knew about. It was kind of tucked away on the wall. The fire extinguisher actually dated 1989, so it's been forgotten about forever. Yeah, and it still worked. There's actually 2 in there. I removed the second one, after I found it. It was on a different bay. But so I saw the fire extinguisher, and I immediately went, oh no, that's not good. What do I do? So the first thing I thought of was not necessarily how did it go off, but what do I do to clean up my airplane? So I immediately started calling around, called a bunch of local shops, but it was Saturday, so a lot of people weren't picking up. And eventually I called Tom Berge, who did the pre-buy, really great guy, and I left a message, and within a couple minutes he called me back. And I kind of hatched a plan, and he agreed it was a good idea. So the idea was basically take it all off with shop vacs first. So we did that. We had 2 shop vacs with some from my friends of mine up at Flying Cloud. We spent 7 hours cleaning it first with shop vacs, and then it's very fine. So it's kind of like flour. So if you like hit a bag of flour in your kitchen, it just goes everywhere. It's kind of what happens here. So I then started to take little fine paint brushes in between every crevice and crack and try and suck it out at the same time because I had nothing better to do on a weekend. So that is what I did. And I think in total we spent like 14 hours between 2 days cleaning it. So first sucked everything off that we could. That was kind of the first plan. Then it was going to go, we looked at every area that we couldn't maybe get into, so any hinges or anything, and try and blow it out with some compressed air. And after that, I had actually called the fire extinguisher company and had asked, hey, what is like a neutralizer to this? And it was just baking soda. And I was really worried about mixing water with this because of possible corrosion. So I really wanted to make sure I got everything off of it first that I could. So that's where all the kind of labor came in. So got everything that I could off of it, and then we just took damp rags first and then wiped it down with the baking soda mix for a couple hours and got it really, really clean. And then at that point, the guy next to me, so there's a nice Colt there, but on the other side he's got a Bonanza, and then he's got a little Grumman. And he came up, and he was the one who saw the fire extinguisher, and he was like, this didn't just go off, like someone sprayed it. So that was when I realized, oh no, I probably should have made an additional call to the local authorities instead of cleaning my airplane off for how many hours. But it's one of those things where when you see it, you don't really think straight. You're just like, I need to get this off. I need to fix my baby. So I'll show a couple more pictures. It's coated on pretty thick, and the other thing too is if you just were to wipe it, all the paint gets really scratched because it's like highly corrosive sand. Essentially, is kind of how I explained it to some of my friends. So that kind of shows how if you were to wipe it off with just a rag, it pulls up like that, and it's kind of thick, and it scratched the paint, which I found out pretty quick when I wiped a small section. So didn't do that again. So here's the other wing. So this is when I realized that something else happened, because the other wing on the other side was sprayed as well, and the extinguisher is on the opposite side where that Bonanza is. And I did have, I used to have blankets over the wings and everything because I didn't like any dust getting on it and stuff, and it was pretty dusty in the hangar at that time. So the blankets came off except for the cowling. So essentially all surfaces got sprayed with the fire extinguisher and the canopy as well, which is actually what Tom was more worried about, with chemicals being kind of tricky on that. So here's another picture. So there's the bottom cowling sitting off there, and this is kind of the weird part about it was I have a bench there full of tools, a bunch of DeWalt drills and various things because I'd been working on the plane. None of that had been sprayed. And on the Colt, if you put your hand under the wing, there wasn't anything on it. So they only sprayed my airplane, which was kind of weird. And also the bottom side of the cowling there where the air intake is, that side was sprayed, but not the other side. And that's where it was pretty obvious that they walked around and sprayed it. The other thing too is whoever went in the hangar, I didn't realize it until the guy next to me pointed out when he was there. They opened up every cabinet of everyone in the hangar and went through everyone's stuff, but they didn't take anything, which was kind of weird. We have an A&P at the end of our hangar, and he's got lots of very expensive tools. They didn't take anything. So very, very weird. So basically back to that point, I then did call the non-emergency line, and I think one thing to note about that of significance is that they didn't really understand that spraying a fire extinguisher, this type of fire extinguisher, was a big deal. So it was very difficult to get kind of a response on that. So they didn't come out the first day or the second day, and then eventually a report got filed, and then a detective got assigned the case, and then it was kind of a big deal. But at that point, too many people had been in the hangar, and I had touched things that I probably shouldn't have touched, that could have been looked at as part of the investigation. So kind of just a note on that is when you realize something like that happened, don't touch anything. Even though my dad was a sergeant for 30 years, that's still went in one ear and went out the other, apparently. So, yeah, that one, he wasn't too proud of that fact, but oh well. So eventually they came out and looked at it and everything, and they didn't mess with anything else. They actually went in the airplanes, and this is the part that kind of worried. So Vicky, she's next to me. She's a wonderful lady, and she went in her airplane, and she noticed that some of her cables were messed with. So they unplugged her battery tender and put the cap back on, which made no sense at all. So she noticed that because the little red light was flashing on her battery tender that she has. So it looks like they also went in each airplane, but I know they couldn't get in mine due to the way that the canopy locks and closes, and I also don't keep any keys, anything in there where everyone else keeps their keys in the planes and stuff. So that was also kind of weird. So I don't know if they decided to spray my plane because mine was the only one they couldn't get into or do anything with, but that's kind of what happened. So this also shows kind of more of the concerning issue is that it got in like every hinge and every nook and cranny, and it's pretty difficult to get in and through everything. And so I talked with a bunch of different people. I made a post on Vans Air Force forums, and I got a bunch of people reaching out to me. And one was with the FAA, airworthiness rep and IA and stuff. So I called them up and talked to them, and they had actually seen this 3 times before. None were with like a malicious intent. They were all accidents, first start engine fire type things where they sprayed it. And he said the one that came in 1 year later, he had it in as conditional, and they opened up, and he said the stuff was everywhere. It was inside the wings. There were bolts that were corroding inside that they only sprayed the engine when it had the engine fire on the first start. So that kind of made me go, okay, well, I should probably talk to insurance. So I did. They came out. Long process there, which I have lots of details. If anyone wants to know about how that goes, find me after. But essentially it came down to them coming out, looking at it, also doing an investigation with the police, and they deemed it a complete loss. So this plane is totaled. So that's kind of I have more to say, but that's the quick story about how I bought and sold my first airplane in under 2 months. It's kind of how I describe it to people. So I was like, yeah, it's kind of a world record for doing it not on your own accord. But so I have a few more pictures. So this is down by the A&P. This is when I realized that something else was up. The person or persons who were in the hangar, they walked through every bay. And once the guy next to me had told me, hey, some of my stuff has been messed with. And that's when we walked around and looked. So this is just like some receipts and paperwork that he had on his toolbox there that had been tossed into the water for no reason. I think they were just shuffling through stuff. But the guy next to me also had logbooks. For some reason, he keeps them in his desk right next to his plane, but they were taken out and in a bag, and they were actually tossed. We had water coming in the hangar with the crazy snow and everything that we've had thawing and melting. So his logbooks were in the water. Luckily, the logbooks that did get wet were his pilot logbooks. He had like 2 extras for some reason. So his one that was fully filled out did not get water in, but his 2 extras that he was, I guess planning to use in the future when he flies more, were fully full, just all water. So they went through. It wasn't anything targeted. I had just got a hangar spot there like a month and a half ago. And I'll talk more to kind of that bit, but they went through and kind of rummaged through everything. They left like a flashlight on that someone had, the Colt owner had. sitting on her shelf and stuff. So yeah, that was interesting. So here's the fire extinguisher, and this is kind of like the main reason I also wanted to talk was how bad these fire extinguishers are, especially around airplanes. You know, I had always learned you don't have one in the cockpit because you pull the pin, you spray it, like you're not going to see anything. But I didn't realize the damage that they can do. I'm not around fire extinguishers all the time. I'm a computer nerd, so that's not really my area of expertise. So this is a Class ABC monoammonium phosphate extinguisher, and Class BC are ones that like ramp guys will use and have on hand. So what happens with this one when it gets sprayed is if it doesn't get cleaned off, and even if it does, it can cause corrosion. But the main thing is if it doesn't get cleaned off right away, it will cause corrosion pretty quickly. And yesterday I was at the hangar cleaning up my tools and stuff to bring back home. And I have a few things that aren't stainless steel or treated, and so things like a blade to get off. I was scraping off some of the excess like epoxy at one point and stuff, and that stuff is already really, really corroded. It's just completely rusted. So I had a bunch of like Milwaukee little blades for box cutter, and those were all rusted. So I had to toss those away. So the things that weren't treated rusted at a really alarmingly quick rate. I think also because of the thaw, was excess moisture also in the hangar, which also made it happen quick. But yeah, so we found the pin pulled from this extinguisher on a chair next to it, which if I would have been able to think fully through it, obviously a fire extinguisher is not just going to go off, they have to pull a pin. I should have thought of that right away. But regardless, so it's a tiny little one. I don't remember how big it is, but I could basically fit my hand around it. And it's from 1989. It didn't have a lot of juice left in it, but it was enough to, total out the airplane. So I removed the other extinguisher, like I said, and the airplane, I believe, will be at a salvage auction next week. So. That's kind of the deal with that one. The other things that I'll speak about is the investigation is still ongoing. They do know who it most likely is due to Flying Cloud has security gates and barbed wire fences, and then also police patrol, and then our hangar's also locked. So they saw them coming in and everything. The problem is we don't have any cameras inside the hangar. So there's not really any way to prove that they were in the hangar because of where the cameras were, and the fact that we touched everything, and so they couldn't get DNA or anything. So it's not anyone at the field. There's not anyone mad at anyone in the hangar or anything like that. There's no drama. It's a troubled individual, a younger person that I don't think realized probably the damage they were doing. So in that regard, I think that's a good thing to note, that it's not like something super malicious or targeted that, someone didn't like someone in the hangar or some weird dumb drama thing. So yeah, that's that story. I think that's the end of that picture. I don't know if there's a whole lot else that I have. I have things that I didn't talk about as far as like dealing with insurance on something that isn't immediate. It didn't have a prop strike. It didn't have anything else like that. So determining that it was a complete loss was a little different in this case. So yeah, I'm looking for an RV4 again. So if you know of someone, I'm in the market. So yeah, I don't know. Questions, comments, or anything, but I'll answer anything real quick before I pass it off to the next person.
So sorry that really sucks. Who's your insurance company and how would you work with?
Yeah. So I go through a broker, BWI, and the underlying policy rater that I think is IET Insurance, I believe it is. BWI is who I called first off and talked to, my broker, and they were amazing. I've never made a claim like this ever. I mean, I made a claim on my house once when hail damage, but that was way different than this. This is way more involved. Lots of trips to the hangar to show with insurance, go to police, and have go and get my fingerprint, or not fingerprint, but DNA taken as elimination samples and stuff. So DWI was so basically I go through and they answered all my questions, and because it's a non-moving thing and I'm not at fault, and there's no real impacts on insurance, and the deductible's like $100 for that. So that's the good thing, is that it's not going to impact my future ability to get insurance or rates necessarily. But the only thing will be I'll probably use the same underwriter again, is probably what will happen, is what they said. As far as like anything bad that could happen as far as like insurance coverages, they're probably going to be the ones that are going to be writing any policies going forward for a short amount of time for me, just to kind of recoup their cost or what have you. So, yeah.
Any advice on hold value?
Yeah. Oh boy, I made a mistake there. So yeah, I bought the plane. It was a pretty good deal because it had not flown for a while. It has a brand new prop. It has 21 hours on it now. It had a bunch of new stuff, new battery, etc. I had the hull at slightly less than what I paid for it, and I figured I'll change that after I go through and update the panel, because the panel is very old school, which is what I wanted. And I figured at summer when I'm done flying it, I'll update the panel and update the insurance. So I went to a slightly less hull than I probably should have. So yeah, that I would, if I went back and did that again, I would probably do a little extra over what I had the hull at, just because of the fact that, sales tax and everything on the next RV and all that stuff, as well as the upgrades. I spent a bunch of money and time. I spent like 30 hours doing the work on the RV. And also putting in like the brand new Tanis heater and the lines and all that stuff. So that was kind of a mistake. So I actually, my friend who got me into RVs, he turned around and immediately put his hull value at what it would be if he were to buy a replacement today. So he was like, yeah, that's a good wake-up call to me. I said, yeah. So you don't think about this kind of a thing happening, or like your hanger on top of it or something crazy. You think, oh no, I'm not gonna ground loop it, or I'm not gonna do whatever, since we both have tail wheels. And so yeah, that was something that he changed right away too. So yeah.
So what is the proper agent for in the hangar in your airplane that you should have?
Yeah, so not that. So basically, from what I know, it should be a Class BC fire extinguisher, should be what you have. Yeah, not ABC. So the ABCs, it's really, if the hangar's on fire, a small little extinguisher is probably not going to do a whole lot if it's a ABC fire extinguisher or not. So I know I talked with the ramp guys at Elliott, and I believe they said they all have BC fire extinguishers. And if you look up some of there's articles around 2013, 2014 where service bulletins went out by a different fire extinguisher company about having BC fire extinguishers on aircraft and banning the use of ABC on ramps, specifically ramps it was, because I think most people have a halon or a different type of inside the cockpit, but outside on like the ramp, like a BC fire extinguisher is what is primarily used from what I know. So yeah, but I'm no expert there, so this is not what you want. So. Yeah, so that's the thing. I think the Colt is probably fine, based on what we saw and we were looking at it. Now, that is another concern I had, because that stuff, like I said, it's like flour, and you hit a bag and it goes everywhere. So it's still on the ground. So if I go back a few slides, you'll see on this one I have a new tarp underneath it, and I spent some time trying to get everything out of the ground, but I didn't have enough time. So I basically just covered up what I couldn't get to that was sprayed. But there's still stuff in there, and you can see in the bottom left here some water that came in and frozen. And so the nice part was that some of it froze into the water, so I was able to take an ice chipper and chip out with the ice and get rid of it. Now the problem is the plane to the right of me is a Bonanza, and from what I know, their rudder vaders just kind of disintegrate if you look at them. The corrosion questions I really have is about that aircraft. It didn't seem like, I think because the fire extinguisher is so old, it came out kind of clumpy and not as fine. So it didn't go very far. But I don't know if either of them are going to be contacting their insurance or if they're just going to monitor and watch. But one of the things that when I did contact my insurance that they said was an option was when you make the claim, they could do it where they don't make the claim, but they mark it as an incident as of note. And then if for some reason a year later we see corrosion, then it would be traced back to that incident and then could be covered. However, when we contacted my insurance, they immediately were like, no, we're going to come look at it tomorrow and probably write it off. So I would suspect if the other two people contacted their insurance about it, they would probably do that first option, their insurance companies, where they mark it down as an event that happened or an incident. I can't remember the exact legal term that she used, but there's a term that they use of marking down like an incident that then if they do find corrosion problems in the future, it'd be covered by that. But yeah, so yeah, we'll see, I guess, how the Bonanza is, but I think the Colt is fine based on what I see. But yes, I will be going through probably in the next week and trying to get everything else out that's stuck in the rocks still because it goes everywhere. Cool?
Thank you much, Eric. You get to hang on to that there, Pete. Thanks for that. Yeah, that was a very interesting talk anyway. Let me introduce Pete Howell. Most of you know Pete. He's been flying in his RV 9A a lot for the last 16 years, right? I think it has been. And going to tell us his life story, I think, is on the, on the agenda. So Pete Howell.
Thanks, Doug. As Doug said, my name's Pete Howell. We finished the RV9A in 2006. Doug did a first flight, and then ever since then we've been going all over the place in it. My wife likes to fly, the kids like to fly, so it's been a really good time. I think the best picture we have it up here in the left corner. Peter Frayling took that hanging out of the back of a Cessna 185, I think. During some sunset, we got some really good pictures. And then Bernie took the one down in the lower right there. We got a map of different places we've been, so that's been a lot of fun, and we'll kind of get through that. We'll go through some things in the beginning, and then it becomes kind of like an old home slideshow. If you guys want to leave or get donuts, that's fine. So just push the button to go forward? Okay. That's the right side. There we go. I'm Pete. I have a degree in aerospace engineering. I did that for a few years in college at McDonnell Douglas working on fighter planes down there. I got assigned to strength engineering where I decided that was not what I was going to do with my life, and got in consulting after that, and that's what I've been doing ever since. I work at United Healthcare. I design for a long time women's health programs, which is really weird, but it's interesting. And now we do things for special needs kids, which is actually very satisfying. This is my plane, 2006 RV9. It took me almost exactly 3 years to build. It was a quick build. As you guys know, the Vans planes are great for building. We had a lot of fun doing it. Funny story was the tail kit, at least at that time, came via UPS. And written on the outside was all these things, high value aircraft parts, do not crush, all these things. My wife, I was at work, my wife was there to receive it. And the UPS guy goes, so your husband's building an airplane in the garage, right? And she goes, apparently, yes. But it was funny, we had the same UPS guy for a long time, and he kept building, bringing parts to it. And at one point, he dropped something off, and my wife was very excited to tell him that week it was leaving our house, at which she was planning a big party on the deck because we wanted to get the darn thing out of the garage. So that was fun. I've got almost 2,700 hours. Actually, it's up to 85 now. I've been flying a lot the last couple of weeks. It's great. It's not the fastest plane. It's not the prettiest plane. It makes landings, my bad landings, look good. It's just a joy to fly. So, and you guys that have RVs flying, you'll know that already. All right, some details on it. It's a quick build slider. I've got an ECI 0320. It's got a carb. It was during that era where ECI had problems with the cylinders. It supposedly has the bad cylinders. I've never had a problem with them. I've talked to ECI, or well, I guess it's Continental now. They got a guy who's their engine guy who was never very concerned about it. So he says just keep flying them, watch them, which is what I do a lot. Hartzell constant speed prop, which is amazing. Carburetor, which is simple, and it works just great. I've got dual PMags on there, which love them or hate them. They've worked really well for me. I think they let you run really efficiently, which is great. My navigation's a Garmin 396, so very, very high-tech avionics in this plane. Garmin SL40, which works great. We did upgrade the transponder. I had an old Collins transponder, and then when ADSB came in, we put the trig in for ADSB out, and that's good. 2 small Dynons tell me what the engine's doing, which is very important. The other one is great for true airspeed, but to be honest, most of the time I don't look at that for anything else. I've got a 2-axis autopilot, an old ADI Pilot 2, which is wonderful. Local flights, whatever you do, I use the autopilot. It flies way better than I do for doing things and lets you kind of look out the window. I take a lot of pictures, so it's nice to have the autopilot on while you're doing that. Simple car paint with vinyl graphics. Like I said, it's not the greatest looking plane in the world, but it's held up really well. There's scratches, I call it warts and all. The interior is all messed up from climbing in and out. We've had bikes in there, we've had a lot of dogs in there, which I'll show some pictures of. I did put an iPad in. I run Garmin Pilot for ADSB. It's wonderful. All the information is right there. And for a VFR plane, it works great. Lighting, I did some homebrew nav lights from LEDs, which have worked really well. I don't know if they're completely legal for night flight, but I don't fly at night anyway, so it doesn't really matter. We built an HID landing light out of some old car parts, and that's held up really well too. Very bright, you can see it. And then for a while we did a lot with APRS tracking. That's where you've got these ham radio in your airplane, and people could see where you were, which before ADSB was kind of the best way to do it. ADSB kind of makes it redundant now. Many of you know my wife, Andy, so this was really great to be able to come to talk to you guys without her, because that's the look I get whenever I stop to talk to people about airplanes. To be honest, she's been great. She likes to go places. We fly all over the place. She sleeps in the airplane, which Mike Hilger knows really well, but we have fun. Let's see here. Oop, wrong button. So, Doug says I'm cheap. I am cheap. I like to be cheap. How do you do that? Well, compared to our friends who fly certified airplanes, build an RV. It was cheap. Back then, it's probably $66,000. The comment that was just made about upping insurance is probably really good, and I need to do that. I think it would be about $105,000 today, if not more, depending on the market. Mine wouldn't be that much, but something like that. The greatest thing we can do is be your own mechanic. So you get the repairman certificate. I've got Bernie, who's in our hangar, has 2 planes. He's got an RV and he's got a Bonanza. Every time that Bonanza goes for annual, the dollar amount that he tells me what it costs to just get the annual done is amazing. So we can do this stuff. A $500 annual, unless something major goes wrong, is pretty expensive. I mean, you're doing the work yourself, the parts are cheap, all those things are great. I use MoGas. I know that causes people to talk a lot about it. It's worked really well for me. You have to know what you're doing. That's a whole nother presentation. In fact, I just saw one last night I was watching on the web. Guy in Oregon's got an RV-12, got vapor lock. He goes through all the different things, and Vans is looking into it now too because they're a little bit worried about it. Great presentation. If you want to use MoGas, go look that up. Dan Singh, I think, is the guy's name. It's a great presentation. But he goes through all the things you have to worry about. We have winter gas here, which can be bad. You have to know when you're doing it, because about this time of year, if you've got winter gas in your tank and all of a sudden it gets to 85 degrees like it did a couple weeks ago, you've got to be really careful with this stuff. Other than that, though, it burns clean, it's cheap, it works really, really well as long as you know what you're doing with it. I run lean to peak. Other than when I take off, as soon as I get to altitude, I run lean to peak all the time. It's cooler, it's efficient, it works really well. We've got some boroscope pictures of the engine. I think it keeps it really clean, so I like to do that as well. Fly a lot, you got fixed costs. You're paying for a hangar, you're paying for insurance and other things. I like to fly. I go after work, I go on the weekends. Any chance I get a chance to go, I do. I said I'm lucky too. My wife likes to go, the kids like to fly with me, the dog likes to fly with me, so I go any chance I can. A standard flight for me is I get done with work, I head out to the airport, I'll take off from Anoka, fly down over St. Paul, down the Mississippi, down to Red Wing and up to St. Croix. It's a half hour, 40 minutes, depending on how many circles you do to take pictures, but it gets you out there, and it's great. It's great for the airplane. They like to be exercised. For me, it was don't over-equip. I love all the new Garmin panels and touchscreens and everything. I got a couple old Dynons and an iPad, and for what I'm doing with the airplane, it works great. Whether that's local, we fly a lot across country, we only fly in good weather, we fly during the day, it's just great. You can do whatever you need to with just that, especially with things like Garmin Pilot and ADS-B. You've got a lot of information, cheap information right at your fingertips. I've been pretty good at fighting the upgrade monster. Once again, new avionics are great, but they take a lot of time, they take a lot of money. I'd rather spend that on MoGas or Avgas and go places and see things. I've been asked a lot, my engine is over time for overhaul by quite a bit. Do you worry about that? And I'll be honest, I don't, because I'm watching it. Every 50 hours, we pull the plugs out, we put the borescope in there. You're taking a look at the oil filter that you've got, checking for things. We find some carbon in there, but no metal flakes, which is great. Oil pressure is wonderful, 85 to 90 in cruise. I'm not losing anything there. The thing burns about 1 quart in 25 hours, which is wonderful. It's been that way. Towards the end, when the oil gets old, is when it almost burns all that oil. From the first 25 hours, there's nothing, and then the last 25 hours, it starts to burn a little bit. I do a compression every 50 hours. That's part of the service bulletin on those cylinders, and they're up there, 72, 78, 76, 78. We did have one cylinder about 1,000 hours ago that had an exhaust valve that wouldn't seal. We tried to lap it in place. We couldn't get it. I pulled it off, took it over to Bulldog, and for $300 they put a used valve and a new guide in there, sealed it right up. It's been fine ever since. So that's the only thing we've done to the engine the whole time, which has been great. MoGas, we talked a little bit about this. It's cheaper. You can get credit card discounts because you buy it at the gas station unless you buy it at the airport. In Minnesota, they'll give you a tax rebate, 23 cents a gallon. So if you track the purchases, you keep your receipts, you file at the end of the month, they send you a check. My wife thinks it's funny when the check comes in, I dance a little bit because I think it's kind of funny. But she likes it because I'll take her out for dinner with the money we save on it. No limitations on this. I got a lower compression engine, 8.5 to 1. You got to understand this temperature season thing. Temperature is really a big deal. If you've got the old gas or winter gas in there and you're trying to do a hot turn, you'll have some problems with, in my plane, not vapor lock. I get something called pneumatic lock, which is the fuel boiling in the carb. And what it causes is it causes a rich condition, not a lean condition. So the remedy for that is you got to pull the mixture to go lean, and as soon as you get some cool fuel through there, it works just fine. But you got to know when it happens, what you're doing to make sure, because you wouldn't want it to happen on a hot day on a short strip. That would be bad. I like it because I think it keeps the oil cleaner. My cylinders look pretty good. We'll show some borescope pictures in here at one point. The thing you worry about is this lower vapor pressure, and once again, this is a completely different presentation. Go see that one, which does a much better job than I ever can if you think about doing this. I encourage everyone to learn about it, and if you can learn about it, I think MoGas is better for your engine in the long haul. Over here, the picture that we've got is one of my wing routes. So what I typically do is I run pure MoGas in one tank, and in the summertime I run a mixture of 100 low lead and MoGas in the other tank. This is the tank that has the MoGas in it. The stuff likes to be pushed versus pulled. If you try to pull it and create suction on it, it creates bubbles, and that causes bad things. But if you get it here where the pump is in the root, it pushes the gas through the lines, and it likes that much better. So this was the part here is my only artistic thing on the airplane are the bends in these tubes, which took me far longer than probably anybody is good at this, but there's a bunch of loop-de-loops in here because the other thing you don't want is any right angles to make the fuel flow smoother. Like I said, the only issue I've ever had with this is on a hot turn. I dropped my daughter off over at UW-Madison, and it was about this time of year. I realized I had the old winter gas in there, and when I pushed the throttle full to go for takeoff, the engine stumbled. I also knew if I pulled the mixture back, it would catch again, which it did, and then we were off and gone as soon as the new fuel got through there. All right, enough on MoGas. Performance on a plane, RV9, once again, never designed to be the fastest RV that there is. I like to run it when cruised. You get up over 8,000 feet, you can get 150 true on 6 gallons an hour, which I think is great. Flying around town here, 5 gallons an hour gets you about 130 knots true, which is great for sightseeing or whatever you want to do. You can run even less than that if you want to go slower, but it's not really necessary. Like I said, MoGas Lena Peak. When I was building the airplane, Tom Earlbeck described it as, not my plane, but a 9 in general. It's like a Super Cub that'll do 160 knots. It's got a great wing on it. It takes off. It gets up quickly, lands slow. It's really nice. Not aerobatic. I don't like to do aerobatics anyway, so it works out good. These are the two 9-ons here, which you can see. I don't know what I was trying to show here. Maybe the 150 knots or what I was doing, and the 6 gallons an hour. And then every year I go through and do some performance testing just to see what's happening. This is the 4 different tracks you fly to get the speeds, and then you average them out. And this particular run, it comes out to be about 151 knots true. So it's consistent. You can get it just about every time. It's what I flight plan for. This is the picture section. We'll go through a bunch of different things. So the kids helped out a lot. These are my daughters down here, Kate and Megan. Megan just got married. Kate's about ready to get engaged. So it's been a long 17 years, but it's fun. This is Kate displaying the new landing lights and the nav lights that we built. And this is her making airplane noises in the garage when we were building out there. The canopy's Sikaflexed on. I was told that I was going to die because the canopy's going to fly off in the first year. 17 years later, I no longer worry about the Sikaflex canopy coming off. It seems to work pretty well. It's got no holes in it, so hopefully it solves any cracking issues. We'll see. This is me, much younger with much blacker hair, working on the canopy and putting that front strip along there, which I noticed last night has just got a small crack in it. So not in the canopy, but in the strip, which I'm not happy about. But it's 17 years old. Maintenance things, long list here. Some things that have not gone really well is these are landing gear pant fairings, are the attach brackets. They've cracked. I've replaced them a couple times. This is the old style that Vans had on the nose gear. They've got a new version, which I've just put on. The downside was you had to make a bunch of new holes and fill the old holes and repaint, which I've done. Doesn't look great, but it's going to work just fine. This is the nose cone of this. I hit a chunk of ice, I think at Alexandria, going for breakfast one day. That knocked this up. That's now been repaired and repainted and looks a little bit better. And that was kind of the things that happened during those things. Lots of oil changes. When you do oil changes, be sure and pull the main oil screen, the finger screen that's there. We found some big chunks of carbon in there. So we do that every time. It's a pain on the nose gear planes to get on there and re-safety wire that. One tip I'll give you there is get some of the 025 safety wire, which you can bend with your fingers versus the more heavy stuff. Helps you get it around in there, and that works out pretty well. It's no longer the huge pain that it was to do that. Lots of brakes and rotors, tires. I use the retreads, so I've kind of hogged out the wheel pants a little bit for more space. They tend to last long. They've served me really well. I put a new electric fuel pump in at maybe 2,000 hours. It's fine. I don't know what happened to it. They just die occasionally. I could get it to go if I wrapped it with a hammer, but I didn't want to worry about that. So the new one's $50 to just put one in. We did the nose gear fork and nose gear leg service bulletin. That was a fun time with Alex Peterson. Anybody else do that themselves versus sending it in?
Nobody in the Western world.
Oh my God, we did. So I don't know if there's a video on YouTube that we put out there. We had to strap the leg, bolt the leg to a tug, which Bernie had, which weighs, I don't know how much, an airline tug. And then we had 8-foot poles that we attached to the die, and we had to walk them around. And the noise that the thing made was incredible. But we got it done. It was actually kind of fun, but it was an interesting experience. Nose gear retainer bolts, oversized vertical shim. Oh, so on the nose gear, there was a time, I think they've changed it now. We had the time when these nose gear components were flipping over. They'd land on grass or something, and boom, they'd just go ass over tea kettle. I think they've traced it back, and Alex actually did a lot of work on this, on his, which is previous to my airplane, Vans used to put a solid axle in there. And they stopped doing that, and for a while it was just a bolt with some donuts on the side. And what he figured out was when that happened, that bolt would flex, that would hit the bearings and cause the nose wheel to lock up. And when that happened, that's when these planes were going over. The fix was to make it like his, where there was a solid piece of aluminum tube that went through there. And then what you had to do is shim that up with some very thin shims to set the bearing preload. And once we did that, a lot of these planes stopped going over. I think Behringer or Matco's now got an adjustable axle you can put in there to make that happen. So we did that. That was an interesting one as well. Nose gearing fairing brackets I talked about. At one point, the carb floats had a AD on them we had to replace. I've had tank senders that have gone out. I think both have been replaced now, put new ones in. Recently, I had a fuel leak that we couldn't trace down. I thought it was one of my tanks going bad. Actually, I pulled the tank and looked at it and realized there was no leak. It was actually one of the union joints that was connecting the tank to the airplane. One of the seals had failed in there. So we put a thin washer. They make washers you can seal these joints with. We put that in there. No more leak. So that was cheap and easy after, of course, I pulled the tank and took everything off. But that happened. We've done intake and exhaust gaskets on the engine. Just recently, I took all the old Vans rubber hoses that came with the firewall kit and put new Teflon hoses in. Those will be lifetime, which is great. I talked about the electric fuel pump that died. We had a mechanical fuel pump that started leaking. I think that happened at about 2,200 hours. That's an interesting process until you realize the tricks. Once we did that, you can hold the plunger up and put the new mechanical fuel pump on, and it goes very quickly after that. But it's one of those things that were things like Vans Air Force. Huge advantage because someone's run into this problem before, and you can learn all the things about it from them. I put on a lifetime oil filter, actually before the whole COVID and oil filter thing turned down, so I've had that on there for about 1,000 hours. I like it. It's a solid aluminum unit. It's got a thin mesh screen. You can clean it out pretty easily. Tends to catch a lot of stuff. Like I said, we find carbon in there. It's paid for itself at this point versus buying disposable filters. There's a green aspect to it, which I don't care that much about, but I think it's kind of bad to throw a bunch of those oil filters in the landfill if we can avoid it, so that's good. The oil pressure senders from Dynon originally were things that were sourced from VW. They go out every 700 or 800 hours. They're $50. They're cheap and easy to replace. That goes pretty easy. I had to put a new starter solenoid on at one point. So on my SkyTech lightweight starter, there's a solenoid in there that after, I think it was 1,700 hours, the contacts start to get carboned up, and all of a sudden it doesn't start the way it did before, and sometimes it doesn't start at all, which is not good. 2005 Crown Victoria part from the auto store. You put that on there, $20. It's good. Lifetime warranty, so when it goes bad, you pull it off. Alternator, same thing. I've got a 1987 Suzuki Samurai as far as O'Reilly Auto knows, and I put that alternator on. It's gone, the rectifier part's gone bad twice, and I've replaced it. Good as new again. Like I said, if I was flying hard IFR, I wouldn't do that, but for VFR, it works fine. I've got a battery. If the alternator goes out, I can run the plane for an hour or two on just the battery, and it works out okay. Air filter changes with the K&N filter, clean and replace, that's good. ADS-B, we talked about. I talked about the valve. There's my Samurai alternator. The nose gear pant. Like I said, I put the new brackets on there and ended up having to repaint that. The weather wasn't good when I did this, so tip, if it works for somebody, you can go to Sherwin-Williams. They make a water-based enamel that they can basically match any color. I took the whole wheel pant in. That was an interesting discussion with the young lady in there. She didn't know what it was, and I said, it's for an airplane, and she didn't want to know any more about it. But she matched the paint, and it looks really good. And I was able to paint the thing in the kitchen because it was 0 degrees outside and I wouldn't go out there. So it matches pretty good. If you look real closely, you can see it. Don't look real closely at my airplane on anything. Just recently had the prop overhauled. We sent that down to Memphis. The guys at Memphis Propeller did that. Turned it around in a couple weeks. Thanks to Mike Hildrew, I got his prop box to pack things up in. We sent that down there. Interesting about that, if FedEx knows that it's an airplane part, even if you pay for ground shipping, they put it on an airplane. So we shipped it on a Friday. It was delivered to Memphis Propeller Saturday morning, and they weren't expecting it. Same way on the way back. They shipped it on a Tuesday, Wednesday. It was ready to pick up, so I thought that was good. Last thing here is EMAG checkups. Every year you pull them off, you check the bearings. I think I've sent them back twice now, and they kind of do their mini overhaul. It's like $80 for each one, so it's pretty cheap, and it's worked out great. All right, enough on maintenance. What else do I got here? Trips. So we'll talk about things here. My most common trips are, my mom is almost 90, lives in South Bend. If you've driven to South Bend from here, it's 10 to 12 hours to Chicago, depending on traffic. It's not very much fun. The RV can make it down there in a little over 2 hours, which is great. There's a little airport north of South Bend we land at. She picks me up. We go to lunch. She always has a list of things that Pete needs to do to fix for her. I do those things, and then by 4 o'clock I jump back in the airplane. I can be home for dinner. So it's just, for that, it's been really amazing. My twins went to school over at UW-Madison. That was a huge trauma when they left for my wife. So often we were over there for lunch to say hello to them, which worked out great. Madison Airport's wonderful. They've got courtesy cars. You land, go have lunch with the kids. Once again, you can come back, and the same day it works out really easy. My youngest went to school down in Ames at Iowa State, where my wife and I went to school, and my mother-in-law lives down there. So we spend a lot of time flying between here and Ames as well. Same situation. Help my mother-in-law out and do things for her, which it's a 8-hour round trip in the car, which you just wouldn't do. It's a fun trip in the airplane, which is great. All right, one of the things I've done along the way, which I've been really, it's been really gratifying for me, is Pilots and Paws. My dad was a vet. He was a pilot as well, so it kind of naturally fell in. I've got, I think, 30-plus dogs that we've rescued. Most of them were boxers. That's what we've had most of our lives, has been boxers. This case was especially sad. It was a couple that was getting divorced, and the husband got back at the wife by basically starving the dog. So somebody picked it up, got it to a rescue organization, and then Minnesota Boxer Rescue said that we'll take on the case. I flew down to Indianapolis and picked up the dog, got her back. You can see this is us dropping it off down in Red Wing. Saddest case I've ever seen. This is him sleeping on my lap on the way back. Just, makes you feel really good about it. There's a whole organization that does this out there, Pilots and Paws. There's another one as well now. If you want to go out there any weekend, you're looking to fly someplace, you can sign up to say, I'll take a leg from here to here. They'll tell you how many animals there are. You can make sure they're going to fit in your airplane, and they'll break it up for whatever you want to. But it's a fun thing to do in your airplane. It's like I said, been really gratifying. I've been to Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, North Dakota doing this. You could go further if you want to, but those are all really nice flights in the RV. First big trip we took in the airplane, I think this is 2007, was out to Big Sky. My brother's got a place out there. That's my son Ryan doing fly fishing. We toured through Yellowstone. But, just some amazing sights. And I think it hit me somewhere over North Dakota at 10,000 feet. You're looking out and you can't see anybody because North Dakota, especially the western part, there's nothing out there. You're like, holy crap, I built this airplane in my garage and now we're flying someplace in it and going fine. And that was the start of just many, many trips that we took. We've been out to Bozeman a number of times to see family and friends and just to hang out there. It's a great trip. One pass to get through, it's easy. So that was my first exposure to mountain flying. I talked to Doug about it and it worked out really, really well. Bernie's got a place in Steamboat. We've got some friends out there. We've been out there a couple times. Just an interesting place. Steamboat Airport is at 6,600 feet, I think, and the runway's not very long. I worried about that. It was absolutely no problem in the RV. You're off by the first intersection and going. This is my wife's normal mode in the RV. She's always asleep, which is great. It's gotten to the point where, and this is no, what? Well, but here's the other story. She's often asleep before we take off. So she puts her earplugs in, and then she's got her pillow, and she's just out. I don't know if the Lycoming just does that to her. But, no complaints until the landing happens, which usually gets the most complaints. But it works out really well. She's great. She does it. She likes to go places. And that was the big thing for me. There's people have come up and said, how do you get your wife to fly? My wife doesn't like it. The key is going places they want to go. So, she'll pick places she wants to go. We'll find out if there's a way to get there, and if there is, we'll go, and she likes that. She's not crazy about the trip. It doesn't bother her, but she likes to go places, and like I said, she's found ways to sleep.
So do you have a stick on her side?
It's a removable stick, and she doesn't like it, so we take it off, and that's usually in the back of the airplane.
Now I see your secret while she's sleeping. You've got oxygen.
Well, yeah, that does help. At altitude, that does help. That does help. So at one point, we went, this is 7 years ago now, we went out to Colorado, mainly to see a couple things. This is Great Sand Dunes National Park, which I didn't really know existed before we went out there. We found a place in Salida, which is just north of there. We toured this park for a couple days. This is us flying over the pass. So you come over from the east, You get over the pass, and all of a sudden there's this huge sandbox. I mean, it's like nothing you've ever seen before. This picture was actually published in The Atlantic, the magazine, because for a while they were doing pictures of private pilots flying around. So I submitted this one, and they put it in, which is great. This is the sand dunes. So these are people, for reference, these are people up here walking. It's the craziest thing you've ever seen. They're formed by the wind patterns between two mountain ranges. It picks up all this sand and deposits at the base of, I think these are the San Cristo Mountains. I probably got that wrong. But it's like nothing you've ever seen. You walk up to them, and you get out of the car, and it's like there's huge sand dunes in this valley in Colorado. So we did that for a couple days. We stayed in Monarch at 10,000 feet to get acclimated. And then on the final day before we came home, we climbed to the top of a 14,000-foot mountain. So this is one of the easy ones. It's not climbing like ropes or anything. It's walking. There's some scrambling towards the top. All was good until we got to 13,000 feet, and then literally every 30 seconds, you're stopping to catch your breath. That was very telling for us. The worst thing was we got to the top. We saw the flag. Andy wasn't sure she was going to make it, but she did. We get to the top up there. We're hanging out. We had a sandwich, had something to drink. These two young people, 22 years old, ran up the mountain. They got to the top, and the guy started doing push-ups. The gal started doing cartwheels. And we're like, we're old. We knew that at that point. But they lived out there, and they were in really good shape, but it was very interesting. This is the part of the sectional. This is Leadville, which we actually flew into and got their certificate, which was great. Once again, I think it was 85 degrees that day. I worried about the RV. No problem. First intersection, we were up and flying. It was great. But this is Leadville Airport. This is Mount Sherman over here. There's some things that says old mining equipment on the sectional, and we walked right by that stuff going up there, so it was cool. I've actually walked higher during that, or climbed higher, than I've ever been in my plane. I've had the plane up to 13,000. I've never had up to 14,000. So very fun trip. I'd recommend it to go out there. Beautiful sights. The valley you fly up when you're going to Leadville from the south, mountains on both sides, just majestic. It's wonderful. Other thing we do in the fall in the RV, every weekend we go down to Iowa State for tailgates. We actually don't even go to the game. But we started this after my wife's sister died, and she wanted something to do to connect with some of her older friends. We've got friends that have a big tailgate down there every weekend, so we go see them. It was great when my daughter was in school down there. We got a chance to see her as well. Ames Airport's wonderful. It's about 2 miles from the stadium, and what we do is we got a little folding bike we throw in the back of the airplane. We get out of the airplane, unfold the bike. My wife gets to ride on the back while I get to pedal, which isn't the greatest thing in the world, but everyone's happy, so it works out pretty well. I mentioned my mom's in South Bend. Every once in a while, my brother's on faculty there. He can get tickets. We'll go see a Notre Dame game, which is a lot of fun. My daughter Kate's gone with us a couple times, and one thing that happens when you can fly to South Bend is you can take the water scenic route up Lake Michigan's coast there, which is just beautiful. It's wonderful. If you've not done that, I highly recommend it. It's easy. You can get on with flight following, and they'll help you out. You got to be kind of low, but they're pretty good about not sending you too far over the lake. I don't know where you'd land if you got too close since they wiped out Meigs Field, but it's really cool. Then at Waukesha, somewhere you start cutting back to Minneapolis. Been to Oshkosh. I think Andy and I have been there now 6 or 7 times. It's great. The RV activities are wonderful. She likes the Beer Dabbler and the Beer Bash, which are on Sunday and Monday nights. We've got a lot of friends, people that you met during Vans Air Force or on Vans Air Force you've never seen in person. You get a chance to meet these people, and it's always just a whole bunch of fun. There's always some great arrival stories. The worst one for us was some Bonanza driver like cut in line and cut us right off. I never seen my wife that mad. She was just furious about it. She wanted to get his N number. I'm like, that's not what they do. Just accept that he was a pain in the butt, and we're going to move on from that. But we camped there, and like I said, just have a really good time. We've been able to avoid all the bad weather, which is great living here. If you see the bad weather coming, you get in your airplane, you come home, and you can go back later in the week if you want to. So we've done that a couple times. Some neat things around the state of Minnesota we've done. Pipestone National Monument is down in southwest Minnesota. If you're into that kind of stuff, it's really cool. Pipestone Airport's great. They've got a courtesy car. We've been down there. We picked that up. The other thing that I thought was even more interesting is in Jefferson, there's something called the petroglyphs, which are in this big rock formation that's kind of out in the middle of the prairie. When the people came through there long ago, they carved things which have been preserved in the rocks. So we went out there, and what they do is they put kind of a mirror up to it to get the relief, and you can see all the petroglyphs that are out there. My wife's a science person. She likes this stuff. I thought it was cool too, but it's one of those things that I'm not driving out there to do this, but I'll jump in the RV and pick up the courtesy car and go do that and have lunch. It's a nice little trip. So we try to do these things whenever we can. Farthest east we've been is out to the Poconos in New York. We had a cousin that got married out there. We happened to have a day in the fall, or a week in the fall, that was just beautiful weather. So we shot out there. The colors, this is Lake Pocono, were just absolutely amazing. I mean, just mesmerizing. This was the morning we left, and we got the picture of the fog on the lake with the fire trees in there. This is flying over Cleveland, where I grew up as a kid. That's the Burke Lakefront Airport that's out there, so that was kind of neat when we did that. Just a wonderful trip, and it was funny. We were at the reception, and the gal that got married, Noelle, had told everybody that we had flown in our small airplane, and people thought we were crazy, but it was fun talking to people about it, because you just realize how many people have no understanding of small airplanes and their capabilities and what they can do. So it was a fun trip from a lot of different aspects. We've been to Mackinac Island a couple times. I've been with Andy. I've been with both my daughters now. It's a nice little trip in the RV, maybe 2.5 hours over there, something like that. You land right on the island. We took the folding bikes with us and rode those around. You can ride the perimeter. It's a state park. There's an old fort there. It's a really, really interesting and neat trip to do. I'd recommend it. This is a picture of us coming back at sunset, or a little before sunset, with the bridge and a boat going out there. Like I said, neat trip, fun to do in your airplane. The unwashed masses come over on the ferry. You get to land in your airplane. They've got horse-drawn carriages, no cars at all on the island, which is actually really cool. We took a big trip a couple years ago to see family and friends. We went over to Put-in-Bay. This is Put-in-Bay. They have golf carts you can take around. So Put-in-Bay is kind of a memorial to the naval battle that was fought on Lake Erie during the War of 1812, which I thought was really interesting, and you can learn a lot of that history. It's an island, Put-in-Bay. All the little islands in Lake Erie have airports on them. Put-in-Bay is kind of the biggest island, most commercial, but a lot of them have residential cottages, and they have small airports. You can land out there if you want to as well. So we took this trip. We went down to North Carolina to visit relatives. This is one of my wife's college friends who has 5 kids. We took all 5 kids and the adults for rides in the airplane, which was wonderful. They thought it was the greatest thing in the world. On the way back, we went through Tennessee to visit my cousins. They live on a little creek, and they call these Tennessee lobsters, which I didn't know, which I guess are just crawdads, but they were kind of fun. But this was just another trip that proves what you can do in a small airplane. You'd never do this in a car. You'd never do this commercially unless you had a whole bunch of money. But flying your own airplane, you can do it, and you can get just between the places really, really easily, which was great. This is probably one of the greatest trips we took. We went to Moab, Utah. A bunch of national parks down there. Amazing colors. We got out of the airplane, and I told Andy it was like being in a Technicolor dream. You've got this bright blue sky. You've got the red rocks around you. Canyonlands and Arches National Park are down there. I think we went early June, so it was pretty warm. But the parks were kind of deserted, which was interesting to us. But this is, I think, Jefferson Canyon in Canyonlands National Park. We had the place all to ourselves. So we picnic lunched out there and watched the sunset. One of the greatest memories I've got from a long time. And Andy really, really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. But just some great picture-taking opportunities out there. If you haven't been to those parks, go. And it's like I said, I think we flew halfway out there, landed in Wyoming. We kind of took the northern route to get around there, couldn't fly over the high rocks. But it was just a great trip as well. Closer to home, we went to Sleeping Bear Dunes in Traverse City for 2 things. We had never seen the dunes. These are, once again, big sand piles on the edge of Lake Michigan, which are really cool. This is, you can see people up here. You can see how far it is down there. People will climb down to the bottom and try to climb back up. Most of them don't make it back up, and if you get caught down there, it's a $5,000 fine to have the rescue squad come get you. So there's rangers at the top telling you don't go down there, and yet people do. So that was interesting part. Blue Angels in Traverse City, which interesting thing about a small airplane, we flew into the airport there, and the FBO had a special deal to, if you landed there, they'd drive you down to the lakefront for the air show and get you in the VIP section. So we went down there, provided lunch for us, everything. We bought gas, and that's all it was. So just a great time through that. This is on the way back, though, we got stuck. So we came to South Bend, visited my mom. We were coming back through Illinois and got stopped by a line of showers. So we landed at the FBO in DeKalb, which was great. But if you see, I had some really interesting hangar mates. There's 2 P-51s that are based back there. So they gave us a chance to kind of explore and see if those airplanes was great. We waited, I think, we waited quite a while, 4 hours. So we had lunch there. And then on the back side of it, everything was great. And we flew home. And it was wonderful. So one thing about being in VFR, especially in the Midwest in the summertime, sometimes you got to land and just wait it out. There's plenty of places to do that. Find a place with a courtesy car to keep your wife happy because she likes to be fed. A couple years ago, we went out to Glacier. So this was neat because there's a small airport just outside of West Glacier, which is now owned and operated by the RAF, the Recreational Aircraft Foundation, of which I'm getting into now. My wife is actually a member of their staff and does thank you letters and things for them. But it's a 2,200-foot strip, maybe a little bit longer, just outside there. RV had no problem getting in there. So we landed, we camped there for the week. It was great. You can see this little fire pit they've got their things in there. They've got a couple of shelters. Now they've built a big barn that has showers on it. They've got a couple camping cabins that are out there, but just a beautiful part of the world. Some of the best pictures I've taken out of the airplane were flying over the Rockies. This is the morning we came back, left right after sunrise. This is looking up to the north over Glacier National Park. This is the lake up north, which I've forgotten the name of, but it's in a valley. This is kind of everybody takes this picture. It's a rocky beach, but you can just see the clouds. I mean, it's just, it is unbelievably beautiful. Glacier is just great. It's enormous. It's overwhelming, but I highly recommend going out there. And if you've got an RV, this field's available to you. They don't ask any more than a donation when you come in. It's a great organization too. That's a whole nother topic, but if you like to fly into small strips and do fun things in the backcountry, even for airplanes like ours, you don't have to have a Super Cub with huge tires on it. They're doing fields that anybody can get into and have a lot of fun with. During the pandemic, we went to Pictured Rocks up in Michigan, which is another place. I'm not driving up there, 8 to 10 hours I think it was going to be. Flew the airplane up there in a couple hours. Munising has a strip, a grass strip up there. I got in touch with the guy that runs it and checked about conditions. He says, I fly a Cherokee off it all the time. He goes, it's just been mowed. It's in great shape. They've got a community bus that comes around, and if you make pre-arrangements, they'll stop and pick you up, and then they'll bring you to wherever you want to go, which is downtown. We jumped on the boat and just had a great tour up there. It was a lot of fun. Sure. No problem. Cornucopia is a new field they just opened up on Lake Superior up by Bayfield. Great little airport, kind of short, once again 2,000 feet, but RVs don't really have trouble with it. They've got a fly-in every year, which we've been to for the last couple of years. You go up there and camp, and they've got a big dinner, and they have activities. The last activity we went to was touring the sea caves. You can go to an outfitter, and they'll put you in a kayak. We rode out there. That was really good. Of course, in Wisconsin, you have to have spotted cow, so we did that one evening as well, but beautiful sunsets. This is a great little airport. If you don't mind flying in grass strips, I'd highly recommend it. It's an hour up there. It's just beautiful. They've got bikes in a little shed that you can take right into town to get some lunch or just go down to the lake shore and see what you want to see. Been to Milwaukee a couple times. If you're into art, this is the Calatrava Art Museum, which has these wings that unfold. Just really, really amazing, beautiful stuff. They've got some great art in there as well. Both my daughters have been over there. I took Andy over. Andy got to the FBO and got into the chair where she fell asleep again. So there's a little bit of a theme here. She said she would go back just to sit in that chair again, so we're probably going back to Milwaukee. This is probably the biggest airport I think I've flown into in the RV, and once again, no problem. A 737 ahead of us, an A320 behind us. They did great about spacing us out. We got in there. They put us on the runway right next to the FBO. It was easy peasy, no problem at all. We've been down south a couple times. We went to Kentucky to see Mammoth Cave. Once again, flew in a small airport. I coordinated with one of the RV guys on Vans Air Force who kind of told us what to do and where his airport was, and he helped us out when we were down there. We went to Maker's Mark, the whiskey company, not on the same day we were flying, but that was wonderful. They got a tour of beautiful grounds down there. We did some of that. We went to a couple different caves. And then this one is not in Kentucky. This is actually in Wisconsin, where Voyager Village, if you guys have been up there, it's a golf strip, golf course got a strip in it. There's a pub, you can go have dinner, and they've got multiple taps. And once again, I have water while my wife gets to drink beer, but it works for us. A couple years ago, there's a ice fly-in on a lake just up north, which I wanted to do. I've always wanted to do that, so we did it, and it was a lot of fun. It was me and a bunch of Super Cubs. In fact, people were actually excited to see an RV fly in, so people were around the airplane asking questions and doing things. It was cold, but it was a beautiful, beautiful day, and the ice runway was kind of fun to take off on and land on. So that was a nice little trip we took. We've been up to the UP in Michigan. It's just beautiful up there. This is on Tonagon. We went last fall, and the great thing about that was they had a raffle, and they called us the next day and said we run the raffle, so we got a couple nights lodging and a couple dinners up there. We're going to go back and see those people, so that was a lot of fun. And just beautiful. You can see this is out looking over Lake Superior. This is a little bit closer. It's area. The thing I don't like about the UP is there's nobody there, and there's no roads, so you end up probably flying higher because you trick yourself into saying that's a little bit safer, but it's just absolutely beautiful country up there. So, where are we on time, Doug? Are we good? Or?
Yeah, we'll keep going.
Okay, I'll go. This is just a collection of different things we'll talk about. This is great. You guys know Bernie. 2 winters ago, man, it was probably longer than that. It was before the pandemic. We decided we wanted deep dish pizza. So we flew to Chicago, had lunch, and had deep dish pizza. Found an airport. I think we went to Lake in the Hills. They had an old cop car, and there was a Lou Malnati's about 3 miles down the road. We told Lou Malnati's we're going to be there at 11:30. We showed up at 11:35. Our pizza was ready. We had pizza, had a great time, got in the planes, and flew back home. I mentioned we take a look at the engine all the time. So I've got a little borescope we put in the engine. A number of you probably have these. You can take a look at your valves. This is the inside of the engine. You can see if you're getting any buildups or anything, or if the valves start to get discolored, which is an indication they're not sealing well and they're overheating and things like that. So every 50 hours we put that in there and take a look at that. This is up at Bowstring, which is another really fun grass strip up north. RAF is part of this airport as well, but it's really well kept. It's got great drainage. It's like a golf course. They've got a hut. They've got a showers up there. There's cell phone service, whatever you need. I'll fly up there every once in a while and have lunch. It's about an hour, 10 minutes in the RV-9. Great place to go. Other fun stuff, just taking pictures for the tailgates. This is my daughter Kate when we were down there. We made the Wisconsin Beer Run. We've got a bunch of New Glarus and other products here that we loaded up. We took those down to Iowa State for the tailgate the next weekend. A couple of pictures. I like taking sunset pictures. I know Donovan does too. He does better than I do at this. But just a number of, if you get unique views from the airplane you don't get from any place else. This was flying to my mom's in South Bend one day. This is kind of low fog over the Driftless area in Wisconsin. I thought it was really cool and artistic. It's kind of a neat picture. It was cold that day, and you can kind of see that in that picture. More sunset photos. I like to take pictures over the lower Mississippi, right there where the bend is before it comes up to St. Paul. This is over La Crosse. I think sunset coming back from South Bend. That's my mom. We like to go see quite a bit. She's a big fan of the airplane because she knows it's probably the only reason I get down there as much as I do. During the pandemic, I started building headsets like Clarity Aloft because my Clarity Aloft was going bad and I'm too cheap to buy a new one, so I figured out a way to make them from parts off of eBay, which was a lot of fun. Our dog Moxie, who unfortunately passed last summer, used to like to fly with me as well. This is a picture of her sleeping in the airplane. So we've taken a different view on dogs. We've always had boxers, which have been big, and the part was I could take my wife or my dog in my airplane. I couldn't take both. We now, because I think it's a good idea and my wife thinks it's a better idea, we've got a toy poodle. We just got a toy poodle puppy, and the idea is they can both go in the airplane, which should be a lot of fun. Daughter Kate, she's probably of all the kids likes to fly the most. Whenever she comes home from Chicago, if it's a good day, she wants to go fly in the airplane to different places, so we do that. And this was up at Bowstring with the RAF guys. We built a pit toilet, so the campground has a toilet now up there. Kate doing a twirl at Voyager Village after she's had a couple beers and we're getting in the airplane to come home. This is her dog, a golden doodle Gus, who went flying with me a couple times. He liked to do that. This is on the trip out to Glacier. This is over the Missouri Breaks area, so this is the Missouri River. There's a little airstrip down here. This is called Heller Farm, which is now a goal of mine. I'd like to go down there. They've got a camping cabin you can get into and kind of watch the traffic and nothing else on the Missouri and be quiet for a couple days. So I think we're going to try to go out there maybe this summer or the next summer. And that's it. This is a picture I took of the solar eclipse. It's got to be 7, 8 years ago from the airplane. Had some filters on, but I got a bunch of pictures that turned out really well. Once again, the plane's a great photo platform if you like to take pictures. That's it. Questions from anybody? Yeah.
In your research, can you use MoGas with fuel injection?
Yeah, should be no problem. In fact, theoretically, it might work better because you've got higher pressure. But here's the deal. Same thing. MoGas likes to be pushed versus pulled. If I was going to run MoGas a lot, I'd find a way to put a pump in the wing root so you could push that gas up to the fuel injection pumps. Because your enemy there is getting bubbles in that fuel because it's being pulled. But once you get it past the main pump there, you're at 35, 40 PSI, your odds of having vapor lock go down quite a bit. And you don't have the carb bowl down there absorbing heat to boil for that pneumatic lock piece of it. So there's guys that do it all the time. There's people that have modified their RVs with pumps in the roots, both sides, and they run exclusively MoGas. Even ethanol-laced MoGas, which is another whole controversial topic, but it works as long as you know what you're doing and you've got the right equipment to do it. Yeah.
Pete, I know this is a very opinionated subject, but do you do oil analysis?
I don't. We did early on, and I tell you what changed my mind is Alex Peterson's not here, but he's kind of an engineer's engineer. His engine went bad, and the oil analysis up to the time was all perfect. And he had some gears that disintegrated, and they never told him anything about it. By doing the filter checks all the time and checking the finger screen and putting the borescope in there all the time, I think I'm going to see something. Maybe there's some trending, but at this point, I won't tell anybody not to do it, but I don't personally do it. Yeah.
Just a comment on your maintenance.
Yeah.
On my plane, I saw a lot of the things that you've done is pretty much common, I think, with the RV because the landing gear and the axles,
Oh, yeah.
stuff like that. And I had $850 list, sold mine, but pretty much common right down the line. I check out those items. So people that are just building,
Yeah.
should expect that stuff. That's like your maintenance.
Yep, it is. I've got, in the annual, there's been published lists, and I've got my own list of things that I check every annual, and you go through and just check it off. And I like to keep the airplane flying, so I'll start an annual, and then over the course of a couple weeks, I'll go through and we'll check things off, get the airplane to flying status. Next time you take it down, check off a few more things, and by the end of a couple weeks, you've got typically everything done. The hardest part anymore is, as I get older, is taking the floors out to look at things because you're leaning over the edge. You end up getting a bruise on your chest as you do that. But the rest of it, they're simple airplanes. There's not a lot to them, and once you learn them, it's pretty easy to know what's going on. I think the checklist is still a great idea so you don't miss anything. But like I said, we've just, other than a few things, we had that, the engine cylinder that went bad. It's been almost like an appliance. You don't want to get too complacent with the whole thing. But, Tom Berge has been a great resource for me, too. If I run into something I've never seen before, you can call him, and he's forgotten more than I'll ever learn about RVs. Vans Air Force can help you out. Once again, someone mentioned they walked in. You ask 10 people, you get 10 different opinions. So you got to provide some critical thinking on your own to make sure it's safe what you're doing. But, they're easy to work on. Yeah.
What's your borescope manufacturer of choice that you like?
Yeah, I get them cheap off of the Chinese sales sites. The one I've got now, I think, cost about $10. So, I guess there's the really nice one that's got the articulating end on it, and those are great. But as Doug will tell you, I'm a cheap guy. So I've got these things. You can get them. They're plumbing inspection cameras. I don't know, the one I've got now is like $9.99 maybe. It's got a 30-foot cable on it, allows you to take pictures. What you do is I've taken mine and I've put safety wire on it so I can manipulate how the angle bends back, because you put the camera in straight, you want to bend it back to look at your valves. That's easy to do. The key is to get one that's small enough that you can double itself back on itself to get through the spark plug hole and get back. But they take good pictures. They really do. Enough to see if something's wrong. And then if you see something, maybe you get someone with a much better borescope to come take a look at what you're doing. Yeah?
So how often do you change oil and what kind of oil do you use?
Yeah, every 50 hours. I've exclusively used Phillips 20W50 cross country. I've not used any additives in it at all. It's just that oil. And it's worked really good. ECI said use that for break-in and use it for regular, and it's worked out great. I do think the key for engines though is flying as much as you can. They like to be exercised. You want to drive the moisture out of them as much as you can. A sitting engine is just sitting there. It's just corroding what it is. Recently, when I had the prop off and I was going to be down for a month, I don't think I've ever gone that long without flying before. I talked to Bill Lane, a guy out of Illinois. You've probably seen him in Vans Air Force. He was an engine engineer for Cummins Diesel. I talked to him and he said, you want to put a dehydrator on that thing. So he sent me some plans and I bought some parts off Amazon and made a dehydrator that we ran on the whole thing. Now, whether it helped or not, I don't know. But what I do now is, since I've got that thing, as soon as I shut down, I've got a tube that I put over the oil breather tube at the bottom, and that puts positive pressure into the crankcase and basically forces all the air out of that thing. Let that run for about 20 minutes, and then I put it in a closed system, so the air comes out of there, it basically gets recycled through the desiccant, and then it goes back into the engine, and that should keep it dry. Now, I've been running for 17 years without doing that. I was probably a little late to the game, but I figured it can't hurt. I've got the thing, so we run that now.
Do you loosen your dipstick?
I do, yeah, as soon as the engine stops, you pull the dipstick, and you can just see that vapor coming off there, which is typically moisture and probably a few other things.
Just a quick comment.
Yeah.
You mentioned the recreational Air Force.
Yeah.
Everyone pretty much has an Amazon account. So if you go to Amazon Smile, you can add recreational Air Force on that, and they'll donate, I think, 0.05 or something % of your purchases to the RAF. That's a great program, great company, and great. We believe in what they do.
Yeah. Yeah, they're good people. We've been really impressed. The part that got me is I've always been interested because I like these smaller fields. We've gone a couple times to these places and met these people, and my wife, who doesn't care about airplanes that much, she likes to go places, she was impressed with what they're doing and how hard they work, and she got a chance to meet all of them at Oshkosh last year, and as soon as she did that, she went to them and said, I don't fly an airplane, I don't know about airplanes, but I'd like to help. And they said, well, can you operate a backhoe? And she goes, no, I'm not a backhoe operator. And they go, what can you do? And she goes, well, I can write. And they're like, perfect. You can write thank you letters for us. So every week they send her a list of people who've made donations. And she's got a nice cards that they've given her. And she hand writes out thank you notes to these people for donations and things that they've done. And that's what they do. It's all based upon volunteers who are doing these things. And like I said, up at Bowstring, they were building toilets and things like that. They have work parties. In fact, there's a work party over at North Fox Island, which is another really interesting place we're going to get to this summer, which is in the middle of Lake Michigan. There's an airstrip out there that the RAF has taken on. So we're going to hopefully get out there and help them move brush and things like that here in a couple weeks. Anything else? All right. If not, thanks for humoring me. I appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. It gives you an example that all the years you work on these airplanes that, hey, you can actually go fly them, do something with them. And that's a great example of that. So thanks for doing that, Pete. I'm all inspired. I'm going to crank up and go somewhere, right? Well, maybe not today, but Monday. Speaking of borescopes, Chris Stenstrom right over here has got a really cool little borescope. So maybe after we're all done here, rally around him. And that thing is amazing for $80, you said? And the resolution is mind-boggling, and he says he's going to do complimentary colonoscopies afterwards. But so he can hang out for that. It works great. We'll probably get together again in June or July, something like that, at Bernie's Hangar for our summer get-together. And this is a great turnout. Thanks for coming. And thank you again. Hang out. I'm going to be here. Got any questions, just let me know. And there's some experts around that take care of you. Okay, thank you.